This is an appeal for us to survive. Anything that you have in the table, whether it is a food, whether it is a household things, nakarating yan sa inyo because of the truck.
It's bad news for truck drivers as well.
Around na 20% na maliliit. Yung maliliit kasi talaga tatamaan dyan eh. Nakauna-unahan. Yung malalaki, yung ginagawa nila sa biyahe, nag-aabono na sila. Nag-aabono na at hindi na kumikita para lang yung negosyo nila continuous. Siyempre pag nagsara yung mga ating trucking, wala din trabaho yung mga driver, di ba?
Even Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion says surging fuel prices is now the more pressing concern as COVID-19 infections have declined. He says it's time for government to give more attention to addressing the fuel crisis. The truckers group says it is negotiating with importers and traders for higher freight rates. Its president Maria Zapata admits many truckers have stopped operations.
It's triple of the amount. But then we cannot request for a triple rate. Say, ang rate mo is 10,000 before. You cannot request for a 30,000 by this time. Of course, it will be rejected. Ano ba naman yung mag-increase sila ng piso per item kung ang item naman is volume items? Pag tumaas ang krudo, taas ang gulong, taas ang pyesa, taas ang maintenance, taas ang sweldo, taas pa ngayon ang premium ng PhilHealth.
Zapata says they try to cut corners wherever possible. Truckers are writing to the next administration to provide shortcuts by keeping logistics costs low to recover lost income. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
Transport officials working to speed up the rollout of the 1,000 peso fuel subsidy for tricycle drivers and operators. Our George Cahilas tells us more.
These tricycle drivers from Santa Mesa, Manila face a daily ordeal of making sure they earn enough to make ends meet for their families. Student fares are their bread and butter, but passengers are few because of limited in-person classes. Their waiting time at the terminal is around an hour and a half to 2 hours. This means longer working time to earn at least 300 pesos per day.
Cash lang, antay lang kung kailan darating. Asahan na lang natin kung meron, di kung wala, ganun po talaga.
With little income for the day, they also need to shell out more for expensive fuel.
Magkano pong gasolina ngayon? Kakapagas ko lang, 81.
They are looking to government to provide temporary relief through the fuel subsidy. But the Transportation Department says each tricycle driver or operator will just get 1,000 pesos, compared to their jeepney driver counterparts who receive 6,500 pesos. Even with fuel discounts for public utility vehicles, the 1,000 peso subsidy cannot fill up 2 full tanks of a tricycle with a 7-liter capacity.
Nakalagay po dun sa sulat po ng DILG sa amin is that 1,000 pesos po. Pero ito po ay depende ho sa natitirang budget ho syempre na naibigay ho sa kagawaran ng transportasyon through LTFRB.
The Transportation Department has already received a list of over 600,000 tricycle drivers or operators who are qualified to receive the fuel subsidy. And it is already processing the paperwork so that the payout may begin.
Asa po yun. Yung ano lang ho, yung government syempre meron ng pertinent documentary requirements ho yan na hiningi sa atin ng land. Ito po yung inaayos natin ngayon.
The Interior Department explains each tricycle driver or operator will receive 1,000 pesos because the total subsidy is only 625 million pesos. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
The Justice Department weighing in on the legality of Cebu Province's new face mask policy. Cebu Governor Gwen Garcia earlier issued an executive order allowing the optional use of face masks in outdoor and well-ventilated spaces. The policy overrides an interagency task force resolution on mandatory masking. But Justice Secretary Minato Guevara says an EO issued by the President, as manifested in IATF resolutions, shall prevail over those issued by local governments. Guevara explains under the Constitution, the President exercises general supervision over local governments, adding that the IATF is composed of cabinet officials who are the alter ego of the President. Cebu, however, is already working to institutionalize its new face mask policy. The optional use of face masks outdoors will become a provincial ordinance by next week. This will repeal all other face mask rules in all its towns and cities. Provincial Board member John Ismael Borgoña filed his draft ordinance today at the Cebu Provincial Board, basically adopting Garcia's EO. The board, however, failed to approve the ordinance because of a lack of quorum. But once the ordinance is approved next Monday, Borgoña says there will be no basis for the police to apprehend or penalize those without face masks outdoors and in open spaces. Well, Metro Manila could escalate from low to moderate risk for COVID-19 in 1 to 2 weeks. The Alter Research Group notes the steady increase in cases, with average infections rising by 31% or from 88 to 115 per day. The positivity rate in the region also went up from 1.5 to 2.4%. OCTA says cases may rise to 300 to 400 by end June and may call for tighter restrictions. But for now, the Health Department says there is no basis to raise Alert Level 2 in Metro Manila.
Hindi lang cases po ang tinitignan natin. Pag tinignan po natin ngayon ang National Capital Region, yes, 14 out of the 17 cities and municipality ay meron ho tayong pagtaas ng kaso, pero hindi pa ho siya nag-translate into more severe and critical, and hospital admissions are still stable.
The DOH reported 1,682 new cases from June 6 to 12. The 7-day average was at 240, 30.4% higher than the previous week. Now, despite low reports of severe and critical COVID-19 cases, a kidney transplant center in Metro Manila is still limiting patient admissions. Carolyn Bonkin tells us why.
This is the hospital gymnasium, and right now it's still filled with 20 patients of all ages who can no longer fit in the regular ward.
The emergency room is also at capacity. For about 2 weeks, the National Kidney and Transplant Institute, or NKTI, has been having a sudden influx of non-COVID patients.
Still full house, so that's 20 patients that are in the gym or our basketball court, because we have no other place to put our patients now. They are all kidney patients, either kidney, urology, or transplant patients who need critical care.
The Specialty Center for Renal Health is at 82% occupancy. The remaining empty beds are reserved for COVID patients. Since June 4th, emergency room admissions are on hold until further notice. Patients who come in still get emergency care and then transferred to other health facilities. They're only admitting transplant patients with medical complications. Wilson's cousin was among those admitted on June 10th. He went straight to surgery.
4 na araw na siya hindi nakakaihi, then nakakatae. Then dinala po siya sa emergency ER para po maoperahan daw po sa sabi ng doktor, para malabas daw po mga bato niya.
Only patients with manageable conditions stay in the gym that's been equipped for peritoneal dialysis and stocked with medicines.
If they're critical, we will not put them in the gym. It's only those who need mechanical ventilation that would be a problem. So when we identify such patients, we transfer them to our wards.
Hospital administrators appealing to hemodialysis centers. Avoid sending them patients if they can do the treatments like blood transfusion, or they can send patients to partner hospitals.
Dialysis facilities are capable. If they come here, they have no blood donors, they have no blood available, so they deplete the blood that's available here at NKTI, whom we want to reserve for critical patients, patients who are going to be operated.
NKTI could accommodate more patients once its newly built 35-bed ward opens this June. The hospital is also in need of about 90 nurses. Caroline Bonkin, CNN Philippines.
Over 300 people are still in evacuation centers in the town of Huban in Sorsogon after Mount Bulusan spewed ash again yesterday. The phreatic eruption took place at 3:37 a.m. State seismologists say the eruption lasted 18 minutes, but the plume was not visible in camera monitors. The latest eruption comes a week after Bulusan also spewed ash last June 5. Officials say most of the evacuees include the elderly and pregnant women. So far, the Regional Social Welfare Office says up to 11,300 people from the towns of Huban and Bulusan have been affected by the eruption. Agriculture authorities also pegged the damage at over 2.6 million pesos. PHIVOLC says it is monitoring 6 active vents of Mount Bulusan aside from the volcano's main crater. When we come back on Newsnight, more details have been revealed about Vice President-elect Sara Duterte's inauguration or oath-taking, including the presence or absence of some of the outgoing top officials. Plus, President Rodrigo Duterte weighs in on the country's relations with China amid disputes over the West Philippine Sea. Details after the break.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement, gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement, ato ni bay. SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement, gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement, ato ni bay.
RPN DXKT 1071 sa dial sa inyong mga radyo.
President Rodrigo Duterte says he hopes to visit the West Philippine Sea after his term ends to assert the country's sovereignty over the area amid China's territorial claims. But as Tristan Odalo tells us, Mr. Duterte is treading cautiously to avoid war.
Amid tensions between the Philippines and China in the West Philippine Sea, President Rodrigo Duterte believes that a war is unlikely to happen. In a speech over the weekend, the president also disclosed a conversation he had with Chinese President Xi Jinping wherein he insists that the Philippines cannot give up its sovereignty over the West Philippine Sea.
At this late day and age of our civilization, I cannot really find a very cogent reason why a war should break out. That is why tayo sa Pilipinas vis-a-vis with China. And I am glad that they have also adopted the same behavior. We continue to talk.
Mr. Duterte also reiterated his position that the country could not go to war. He also expressed his willingness to visit the disputed area as a civilian so that he could not aggravate the situation further. In 2016, Mr. Duterte promised to go to the West Philippine Sea on a jet ski. Years later, he clarified that the statement was just part of his campaign strategy.
But we cannot afford fighting with China. We cannot win and we will lose, and the population will suffer.
Defense Chief Delfin Lorenzana says in an international dialogue held in Singapore that the Philippines is walking on a tightrope. He says the country needs to balance its relations between two superpowers. At least 3 diplomatic protests have been filed against Beijing in recent weeks. The country protested the unilateral fishing ban declared by China on May 31st. The Philippines also opposed the quote, illegal return of Chinese vessels in the Julian Felipe Reef. Manila also slams the recent incidents in Ayungin Shoal by the Chinese Coast Guard. In a statement, Chinese Ambassador Wang Zhilian said that differences are expected between neighbors and the best way to handle this is through bilateral consultations. On the Julian Felipe Reef, the Chinese ambassador maintains that the area is a traditional fishing ground for Chinese fishermen and there is nothing unusual with their activities there. China maintains that the maritime dispute in the South China Sea is just a small part of the overall bilateral relations between Manila and Beijing. Tristan Udalo, CNN Philippines.
President Duterte wants the drug war to continue even after his term. He says he's passing the torch to his daughter, Vice President-elect Sara Duterte, but warns he will still keep an eye out on local officials. CNR Kanghel filed this report.
I would like to appeal to everybody that drugs, especially the military and the police and the Coast Guard who are here, never give up the fight against drugs. Drugs will kill the Philippines. Malapit na tayo nag-narco-politics.
Fighting illegal drugs remains on top of President Rodrigo Duterte's mind, even if he has less than 3 weeks left in office. During his visit to the Metro Manila subway depot on Independence Day, Duterte said his daughter, Vice President-elect Sara Duterte, would continue the drug war. He also assured the police and military that he would take full responsibility should they face criminal charges for going after drug pushers. But even after his term ends, Duterte said his campaign against illegal drugs would continue, and his focus would be on local officials.
Kung wala na ako, sabihin ko na kay Inday, take over. Ikaw nang kunin mo yung trabahong, biro mo yung Department of Education, maraming bata dyan. Do not ever allow contamination dyan. If you have to do it, do it.
After 6 years in office, Duterte admits his bailiwick, Davao City, has been lagging behind in terms of volume of government projects. But he explains he chose to allocate more resources to other areas out of delicadeza.
If by fortunate chance, mabigyan kami nitong bagong administration, then I would say na salamat because nahuli talaga kami.
The outgoing administration assures the construction of the country's first subway will continue under the next president. The subway, which will connect Valenzuela to Pasay City, is expected to be partially operational by 2025. CNR Kanghel, CNN Philippines.
More diplomats paid a courtesy call on President-elect Bongbong Marcos, among them Russian Ambassador Marat Pavlov, who said Moscow is ready to work with Manila to address its energy demand amid the war in Ukraine.
As far as I understand, President-elect would like to continue his independent policy and to cooperate with the Russian Federation.
The president of the Asian Development Bank, Masatsugu Asakawa, also visited Marcos. The ADB vowed to support Marcos's priority projects such as the Build, Build, Build program and other initiatives for agriculture and food security. Another envoy who met with Marcos was Egyptian Ambassador Ahmed Ibrahim. Ibrahim said Marcos will consider attending the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Egypt this November. Danish Ambassador Grete Eliassen said her conversation with Marcos focused mostly on green transition and sustainability. Marcos also welcomed Israeli Ambassador Ilan Flus today. Vice President-elect Sara Duterte will take her oath on Sunday, June 19th in her hometown, Davao City. Her spokesperson, Liloan Cebu Mayor Cristina Frasco, said outgoing President Duterte will grace his daughter's oath-taking, while outgoing Vice President Leni Robredo will not make it because of Naga City's Charter Day. Former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo is among past top officials who will be present at the ceremony. No confirmation yet on President-elect Marcos's attendance. Catch our documentary Inday Sara, the Vice President, and a pre-oath-taking special with senior anchor Rico Hizon from 3 p.m. onwards on Sunday. We'll also bring you the oath-taking of the country's 15th Vice President live, only here on CNN Philippines. Authorities have revoked the driver's license of the SUV owner in the controversial hit-and-run case in Mandaluyong. He is now banned from driving any motor vehicle. The Land Transportation Office said this was not the first time the SUV owner committed a reckless driving violation, citing at least 3 previous cases. The police have challenged the driver to surrender.
Ikaw, challenge kita, Mr. San Vicente. Ayaw mong sumurrender, tama. O isa lang sasabihin ko sa'yo, baka addict ka. Okay? O, ba't ayaw mo sumurrender? Because no person in his right senses will do that. Nakabangga ka na nga ng tao, imbes na intuhan mo, lalo mo pang sinagasaan.
The SUV owner again snubbed the second and final show cause order issued against him last week. In other news, the Philippine National Police standing firm it did not commit any human rights violations following the arrest of at least 93 people in Concepcion town in Tarlac. PNP officer in charge, Lieutenant General Vic Danao, says those arrested were supposed members of militant groups. Farmers and advocates took part in an activity linked to a land dispute in Hacienda Tinang last Thursday. They are detained at the Municipal Police Office pending inquest proceedings. The PNP denied allegations the individuals are kept from being released.
Pinaghirapan ito ng ating mga kababayan na itanim. Only sisirain ng mga lukulukong to. Please do not use human rights in defending your rights there. Imagine, sinisira nyo yung mga tanim. Kung meron pong bail yan at nakapag-bail po sila, definitely they will be released. So again, you are twisting the facts. Punong-puno na po ang ating mga kababayan sa panluloko ninyo.
Police say members of the Anak Pawis and Kadamay groups and 84 nationals have been released. We'll take a short break, and when we return, one of the most watched shows on Netflix is officially returning for a second season. Plus, the Golden State Warriors are victorious in Game 4 of the NBA Finals to level the series against the Boston Celtics. You're watching CNN Philippines.
SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay. SMC, San Miguel Corporation. Bisag unsang industriya ang sudlan niini, tinguha sa SMC ang pag-uswag o paglambo sa mga Pilipino. Karon, gikan sa SMC, aniya na ang SMC Davao Cement. SMC Davao Cement. Gama sa Davao para sa Mindanao. SMC Davao Cement. Ato ni Bay.
RPN DXKT 1071 sa dial sa inyong mga radyo.
Welcome back. If you can't send yourself to the moon, why not let your name take the trip? NASA is issuing boarding passes for Artemis 1, the first unmanned flight test of the Space Launch System rocket and the Orion spacecraft. Those who sign up for a pass online will have their names included in a flash drive aboard the vehicle going to the moon. On to sports news. The Ateneo Blue Eagles head to the step-ladder semifinals in UAAP women's volleyball after beating Adamson over the weekend. Ateneo joins NU, LaSalle, and UST in the Final Four. In tomorrow's semis opener, the Blue Eagles will face the Golden Tigresses 6:30 p.m. at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay. Ateneo head coach Oliver Almadro told CNN Philippines Sports Desk what the team is looking out for in the match.
Well, first of all, UST are well rested. They had a day off because of kami nag-day off pa kami. But what matters is we are prepared physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Ang kailangan namin, we have to start it right and we have to end it right. Yun naman ang nangyayari sa amin for the past games.
And the Golden State Warriors even the NBA Finals again with a 107-97 Game 4 triumph over the Boston Celtics Saturday. Steph Curry dropping a whopping 43 points for the Warriors. Action returns to Chase Center in California tomorrow at 9 a.m. Philippine time for the fifth match. Entertainment news now. It is official. Chart-topping Netflix series Squid Game is getting a season 2. In a letter to fans, director Wang Dong-yok confirmed the news and announced the return of characters like Gi-hon and the frontman, Chol Soo, the boyfriend of the infamous animatronic doll from season 1, is also set to make an appearance. Squid Game is Netflix's first Korean series to reach #1 in the U.S. Jungkook from BTS is marking the group's 9th anniversary by serenading armies with a song he composed himself. The vocalist released My You, a ballad dedicated to BTS fan base. The lyric video now has over 6 million views and counting. In celebration of their 9 years together and their new album, BTS will perform tracks from Proof tonight at 8. The event, to stream live on YouTube, will feature a special guest. The world-famous K-pop group debuted on June 13, 2013, with the release of their first single, No More Dream. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Before we go, we'll take a closer look at how to manage one's electric consumption all week long. The Department of Energy has designed practical and implementable programs for every sector to plan their electric use for the long term. Let's watch this.
Conserving energy is such a buzzword nowadays because you talk about sustainability, protecting the environment. When we conserve energy, we're able to extend its use and limit the deployment, for example, of conventional generating sources like coal-fired power plants. It also allows for renewable energy technologies in generation to meet our demand requirements. Renewable energy alone will not lead to a healthier and sustainable planet and environment. We need to also be mindful of how we consume, and that is where energy efficiency and conservation comes in. Republic Act number 11285 is the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. It was passed in 2019 with the aim of coming up with a energy efficient national way of life for every Filipino. Demand-side management is the process of shifting the load from peak to off-peak. In the Philippines, we have 3 grids. One is Luzon, the other is Visayas, and the third one is the Mindanao. Here in Luzon, the peak demand for electricity happens from 10 in the morning to 2 p.m. In the Visayas and Mindanao, that happens from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., particularly on weekdays. What demand-side management seeks to provide is the shifting of the load from peak period to off-peak period. When we are able to manage the demand during this period, our existing portfolio of power generation is able to meet our demand. Hence, we do not require the need for peaking plants during that period.
In the Mind Museum, we manage our power demand by intensive monitoring of our building operation and equipment, and also understanding our load profile. One of the energy efficient